Okay, ladies and gents, welcome to the live stream today. And it is a wild week. It seems as though everything is happening this week in terms of the things we've been talking about for a long time, the dystopian nature of surveillance and control, artificial intelligence. It's all coming together at the same time. Now, we're going to cover two stories in one in today's video, and we're going to do it not in 30 minutes. Hopefully we'll do that in half the time today, because I want to go over what's actually occurred. Just a little preview here. We've had a couple of things occur. Number one is the ban on this social media app. You can't even say it on YouTube, or if you say it, they will not push the video. They'll think I'm promoting it. But this app here, okay, so we've seen this vote. But I also want to talk about, remember I said a couple, maybe 2-3 years ago now, how this Black Mirror episode, Nosedive, would become reality. Now, what we are seeing is this happening now at a rapid rate. It already exists in China. And I want to go over here it was. I don't know if you've had time to actually watch this, but it was a House committee on possible government collusion with big banks. And if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. I'm going to play a couple of clips. Here's Jordan Peterson. It is absolutely fascinating. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And it's really disturbing, actually, the level that we are at now. And I think Jordan Peterson outlines it really well in his statement, in his testimony, where he's testifying to the House about this, or was it the Senate? But he's testifying about this and what can actually happen. He talks about the Skynet program. This is an actual program from, I know it was in the movie Terminator, but there's an actual program. He's talking about all this and where it's all going. It's absolutely disturbing. We've got to go through all of this. So the first thing then is this ban on this social media app. And look at the support versus the opposition. Only 14 didn't vote, 65 opposed, 352 supported the ban of the app. And if you want to know who supported it, you can go onto this website on the Washington Post and you can look at all the people who voted for it. Now, the BBC leads with a slightly different article on it, but the US House passes bill that could ban this app nationwide. Now, we have a couple of videos. We've got a few videos to play actually today.
I think people are just assuming that it's doing harm, and I don't think that that's true or appropriate.
I think that's insane. I enjoy the content. I get most of my news actually through TikTok.
I feel like it'd be very disruptive, specifically for people that are content creators. I feel like it'd be very
Now you'll notice the BBC is on the side of the app, which is interesting, and they're interviewing only young people because they probably asked a lot of people who are older who don't actually use the app. Now this is what was said then. Outside the White House on Wednesday, a handful of supporters gathered to protest against the bill. And this is the reason for this is because a lot of people earn a full-time income from that app. Now, what we've been seeing in the media is them saying, no one earns a good income, they don't pay properly. Look at YouTube and how great it is, they pay content creators well. Actually, they don't. They take half your money, and then from that half of the money that they actually take in ad revenue, then they try and withhold another 30 or 40% from you, and then you have to try and claim it back. So it's not the way they're portraying it. But they're saying no one earns money on this other app. We'll call it TT, so we don't get the algorithm and AI indexing it here. We'll call it TT. But that's not actually the case. What's happening is a lot of small businesses, and again, who is this affecting? It's small businesses across the US and potentially Europe and UK as well coming up, who earn a lot of money through the app. Not through the app itself, but through affiliate marketing, through promoting their small business, their restaurant, things like that. So this is, don't believe what you are seeing and that, everything there. This is how people are earning some money from it. Now, we had the usual White House spokeslady, insisting that the bill merely sought to ensure the ownership of major tech platforms operating in the US, in red here, wouldn't be in the hands of those who can exploit them. Well, that's not really the case here, because, in fact, let's get on to the bill in a second. I want to show you the bill here. It's only a short one. Because even if ByteDance does secure approval to sell its stake, it's unclear whether any of these competitors have the funding to launch a bid for the platform. The companies previously valued the app at $268 billion. The price tag could scare off some investors. And it talks about all the ad revenue and how much it makes for the US, etc. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is, if you think about, well, who can actually afford to buy this? They're trying to say it's, Chinese owned and everything else. Well, I'll show you the data on it and some of the share. And again, I'm not pro or against this other app, this TT app. So, it's no bother to me either way. I'm very neutral on it. But what I'm trying to share with you is that what we're hearing in the media is an absolute nonsense as to what they're saying. And what they're not talking about is the fact that who's been lobbying for this in the first place? Social media companies. Who is set to benefit from the forced sale of this app in the US, and I think it will go to UK and Europe as well. Who is set to benefit? It is this platform right here. It's YouTube, it's the Shorts platform, it's Meta and IG and the Reels and all the other stuff. This is who is set to benefit. And they're saying they won't find a buyer. Trust me, they will find a buyer. You know that Meta, when it was Facebook, actually bought out hundreds of social media companies, hundreds of them, and they just closed them down. So I'm pretty sure there's going to be a buyer, and that's what some of this is about. Now let's look at this bill, HR 7521. It isn't a large bill, so if you want to read it, it's actually less than 13 pages. So if you want to read that, you can. We're not going to look at it now because we're just going to look at what Thomas Massey, he summarized some of it in this post, which we'll look at. But first, just listen to what he said.
This legislation to ban TikTok is actually a Trojan horse. Some of us are concerned that there are First Amendment implications here. Americans have the right to view information. We don't need to be protected by the government from information. Some of us just don't want the president picking which apps we can put on our phones or which websites that we can visit. We don't think that's appropriate. We also think it's dangerous to give the president that kind of power, to give him the power to decide what Americans can see on their phones and their computers. To give him that sort of discretion, we also think is dangerous.
Okay, so it goes on. There's a lot more to it. You can watch the video on his X. But he really pulled together a lot of interesting information here. And the reason he's calling it a Trojan horse is because this will give the president the power to ban websites, not just apps. We talked about this before, this more control, I think is probably the most appropriate word here. There's going to be on all of us as citizens, and we're seeing it every day, more and more control. See, really interesting here, providing services to distribute, maintain, or update, providing internet hosting services. You see, this bill is not what they are sort of saying it is. It's not only going to apply to TT, it's also going to apply to other companies who are foreign adversaries. Who are we talking about here? We're talking about China. It's worth reading this post. There's some really interesting stuff that he's picked up. A person subject to the direction or control of a foreign person or entity described. So this is all about countering China, is what they say. However, if you look at who owns the app and who's on the board, it doesn't seem as though what they're saying is correct. They said the board is, 5 seats are controlled by China. That's actually not correct. 3 are controlled by the US people. Now, Forbes has led with another article, how it will affect the economy and how it will affect creators. We just talked about this, how much it pays. So they're saying it doesn't pay you anything. Well, it's not about that. It's about the being able to view news on there. And I've said a few times before that it's not really about the app or the website or things like that. It's about the ability for us to have the freedom of choice to look at this news and share news. You know, we can go on there, we can share our thoughts. And what's happening on this alternative app is that you see a lot of what they call conspiracy theories when they're not at all. It's just people sharing their thoughts and views, and they say there's a lot of hate speech. Again, it's not hate speech because they are classifying anything that goes against what the government says or the narratives they put out as this hate speech. That isn't what hate speech is. They're redefining words. They're redefining all this stuff. I mean, George Orwell, eat your heart out here. So the Times, what is the US trying to ban the app, and could it happen in the UK? So there's all this stuff they're saying, and that they've got 6 months to sell it to a US company or it will be banned. Why is it trying to ban it? They're saying it's controlled by China. Now, if you look at, I pulled this out of it here. The company is incorporated in the Cayman Islands, it's 60% owned by international investors, and it has HQ, their headquarters, in Singapore and LA. It spent billions moving the data centers to the US and Europe. And it denies claims about the control of the CCP. Now, just because they deny it, it doesn't mean that it's not true. There will be some form of control here, because if the CCP wants access or something like that, it might be hard to refuse. So there's definitely an element to that. I'm not going to, gloss over that. We could also see something happening in Europe because the European Parliament has banned it from phones now as well. Now, let's have a listen to this here a second.
Your access to the world can be reduced to zero.
Let's just reduce the speed a second here.
If your social credit score falls beyond an arbitrary minimum. This allows you purposefully to be shut out of all activities that can be virtualized. And in a rapidly virtualizing world, this increasingly means all activities: driving, shopping, working, eating, finding shelter, even fraternizing with friends and family, as merely being in the presence of someone with a low social credit score means that your own score can be lowered.
Okay, so this is actually, what he's saying here, this actually exists right now in China, and he's warning, there's a committee going on right now, he's warning against this and what it could actually lead to, because he's saying that this is now looking to come to the US and Canada, these social credit scores. There's proposals and bills for these social credit scores. And 2 or 3 years, in fact, it might even be longer than that, I talked about this on an episode, one of my episodes. Unfortunately, it got a copyright strike because I put about 10 seconds of the Netflix show in there, which was a shame because it was a really good video. You can still find it, but it's de-indexed. But I talked about this situation here. This was a really good episode. It's called Nosedive. So if you want to see the way they live in the future, I mean, it is just weird. Everyone's on their phone. Everyone has to be nice to everybody else, again, which is what they want right now in the West. Everyone has to be nice. Everyone has to be fake. You rate other people all the time. You're rating people. You're giving them scores. Okay, this is what you do. You give them scores on your phone here. It's worth watching the episode. It's really fascinating because at the time it came out, I knew that this was happening in China. Now, there was another point that was talked about here. Listen to this a second.
Because I see it coming. I see it coming here, and it frightens me. I want you to talk about what took place in Canada and if it in any way impacted you.
Well, there was essentially a working class protest against the extensive length of the COVID lockdowns. And
so he's talking about the trucker protest here, and we know what happened to the people.
One consequence of that was that Canadians who participated, even by donating to the protest and even by donating small amounts to the protest, had their bank accounts seized in consequence of a collusion between the banks and the government that was extrajudicial, that was recently deemed unconstitutional, despite the fact that we don't have strong First Amendment claims.
Okay, so let me just interject here a second. So what this is all about is this new banking act that is coming through. And what Jordan Peterson's talking about there is how a number of Canadians were debanked or their accounts were frozen. There was all sorts of other things, even if they donated Bitcoin or things like that. Now, what is being proposed at the moment, and it's worth you watching this hearing because you'll learn a lot from the hearing, is they are looking to so basically, in a nutshell here, the government wants to go direct to the bank and request data on you as a citizen, which breaches your amendments, right? If you're a US citizen, it breaches your rights. So they want to go without a warrant to the bank and say, and they can basically ask for anything they want. So they can say, here's a ridiculous example. How much meat has this person consumed? They can go to the supermarket and ask it. See, the supermarket's very low level. That's pretty much a guaranteed. But when it comes to the bank, this is supposed to be protective measures over you and your finances and what you do with it and what you're buying. But the government wants to go direct now to the bank and request all of this information on you. This is what the hearing is about. There's all these absolutely tyrannical things coming through the pipeline. And the hearing's very common sense. It really is, because they're asking, is there any circumstances you think it would be suitable not to get a warrant to get this information from the bank? And the panel answers and talks about, well, yeah, if there's a criminal investigation or if there's something to do with a serious crime, then yeah, that's understandable. But that's not what the government is looking to do. So there's a lot of things coming through. The social credit score is really disturbing, and the surveillance and watching, even your gait now, which is the way you walk, where they can't see your face and things like that. There's all this stuff coming down the pipeline. It is dystopian in nature. It's very worrying. And as I've said so many times before, trust me, when all this stuff, if and when, comes through and passes, I will be long gone out of any of these countries that are doing it. I will be long gone. No, thank you. I don't want to be subject to these measures. And I would highly suggest, if you can, that you do the same. All right. Crazy, crazy stuff going on this week. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless you guys.